Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Gopi Jana Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Jasodandana Prajanandana Jasodandana Prajanandana Jamana Kiradana Shari Jamuna Kiradana Shari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Jasodandana Jamana Tiravana Shari Jamana Tiravana Shari Jamana Tiravana Shari Jamana Tiravana Shari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivitagacharya Astattara Sattasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Gaur Premanandi. I guess I get to welcome all of you from the Phoenix Temple coming to join the Sunday program remotely by our present circumstance. But we can associate through sound this way, in any case. The topic for this evening is the 6 questions and 6 answers found in the first 3 chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now I know that there are many of you who already have Srimad Bhagavatam in your home. And a purpose that I would like to fulfill is, through this evening's class, you take the time to go through first canto Srimad Bhagavatam. If that could be achieved through this evening's class, that'd be fantastic. When Srila Prabhupada, as most of you know, when Prabhupada came to America from India, he came on a cargo ship, and it was very difficult given his age and crossing the Atlantic Ocean. He had 2 heart attacks, etc. But he came with a mission, and his mission was given to him by his spiritual master. And he was the carrier of the mission to bring the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to the English-speaking parts of the world. So as a elder sannyasi, he carried that mission on his head as his life and soul. And before he came, he prepared 3 volumes, which at that time was the first canto Srimad Bhagavatam. And I heard him say on many occasions, if you can understand Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1, everything is there sufficient to go back to Godhead. So there's impetus to read Srimad Bhagavatam. If you want to go back to Godhead, understand, not just read, but carefully and try to understand Canto 1. Everything is there. And Canto 1 Srimad Bhagavatam, one way of saying what's there is summarized in the first 3 chapters, and that's what we're going to do this evening. So try to listen carefully. If you like to take notes, that's welcome. Take notes, because we're going to be describing the 6 questions and 6 answers found in those first 3 chapters. At this point, in the beginning stage of Srimad Bhagavatam, the setting is the forest of Naimisharanya, and the reason for that being selected as the place is because the sages of the time understood that Kali Yuga had begun, and they knew what that meant. It meant what we're experiencing today, and it's getting worse day by day. So they knew that would happen. And they wanted to do something to minimize those negative forces found in this age of Kali. And so they decided to go to the hub of the universe, the sacred place Naimisharanya, and perform a 1,000-year sacrifice, meaning as soon as one was completed, the next sacrifice would begin, and so forth. So that was their plan. And lo and behold, in their midst was a great sage named Sutta Goswami, who had just heard from Shukadeva Goswami the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. And so they decided to offer a special seat to Sutta and hear from him the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. And it came in the form of questions and answers. The Puranas move like that, questions and answers. And so the sages, headed by Shaunaka, who was a descendant of Bhrigu Muni, and Sutta Goswami, who was the speaker, there were 6 questions. So we're going to quickly cover Canto 1, Chapter 1. It begins with the sages honoring Sutta as a qualified person, saying that he not only heard from Sutta Goswami, but he understood everything that he heard, And not only he understood everything he heard, but he realized everything that he heard. And not only he realized everything that he heard, but he could teach it. He could explain it very nicely. So they were very enthusiastic to hear from him, and they presented several questions, 6 in number. Which are the 6 questions and which are the 6 answers? We're taking assistance from Jiva Goswami. I'll explain for those of you that may not know who is Jiva Goswami. He's one of the principal followers of Lord Chaitanya. He, Jiva Goswami, and his 2 uncles, Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, were amongst the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, very celebrated personalities. And Jiva Goswami explains what were the 6 questions and 6 answers. We're going to go through them. So quickly, we're moving on to chapter 2, because the questions are in chapter 1. We'll refer back to the questions one by one. So chapter 2 begins after Sutta is questioned and respected. He offers prayers in honor of those who he has heard from and great celebrated personalities in the first 5 verses. And then he gives, in the next 2 verses, 6 and 7, he gives answers to the first and second question. So those of you that like to take notes, you can take note, and otherwise this will be recorded. And if I did not yet give to Premadatri the 6 questions and 6 answers listed out in the text document, I'll do that after this is over, and she can forward it to all of you, so you'll have at least a written text that says what those questions and answers are. The first question is a really good question. What's the ultimate good for all people? That's a good place to start. Ultimate good for all people. It's 119. For you note takers, you can look up the verse exactly. What's the ultimate good for all people? It's the age of Kali. People are living in an unfortunate circumstance. In the age of Kali, they need relief. What's the ultimate good? Not only 5,000 years ago, but today. What's the ultimate good for all people? And the answer, the ultimate good for all people, is devotional service. Those of you that are here in the room, you can say the verse with me if you know the verse. Savai pung samparo dharmo yato bhaktir adhokshaje ahaituki apratiyata yayatma suprasidati. The supreme occupation or dharma for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Now, this principle is an essence principle. There may be different isms out there in the world, and the real test or standard is loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord, becoming awakened as a result of whatever someone is doing over here or over there, or this practice or that belief or that ritual. Is loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord, being awakened. And of course that requires some definition of what loving devotional service is, but it's speaking of principle. The ultimate good for all people is that coming to the stage of loving devotional service at all times, in all circumstances of life. That's the first question. Next question is also a really good question. What's the essence of all scriptures? There's a preamble where they say people in this age of Kali, they're lazy, they're misguided, they're short-lived, their interest in spirituality is less, their compassion is less, their good qualities is less, everything is deteriorated. They're not going to take the time to go through all the revealed scriptures to understand the essence. And if there's someone that wants to teach them, they're going to cheat them. So could you just kindly make it really short and sweet? What's the essence of all revealed scriptures, please? That's a great question. And here's the answer. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janiyati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahaitakam. By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. That's the essence. Devotional service of that type, is where it's unmotivated and uninterrupted. Devotional service, that's the previous verse. Unmotivated and uninterrupted. Devotional service. So everything in material experience, everything starts for some purpose. And over on the other end, it stops at some point in time because there's an obstacle that stops it or something. But devotional services doesn't have a beginning and an end, doesn't have a material cause and a material obstacle that can stop it. And when that kind of devotional service is performed, then it's completely satisfying to the self. And it brings knowledge and detachment. Very important principle. Knowledge and detachment are subsets or corollary factors of bhakti. We don't need to separately acquire knowledge or detachment. You acquire bhakti and knowledge and detachment are already there. Just like one of Lord Chaitanya's teachings is, within the heart of every living entity is Krishna Prema. I was referring earlier to the sannyas quarters where I'm staying, and the two entities I'm sharing the sannyas quarters with are two little spiders. And they're on a windowsill. And they're very peaceful. They don't bother anybody. And so we say Haribol to them every morning. And in their heart is also a soul. And in the soul is Krishna Prema. So, I don't know exactly how to wake up the Krishna Prema in the heart of those two spiders, other than saying Haribol every day. And, if I knew what their favorite prasadam was, I guess I could give them some prasadam too. But they're really small guys. They're really tiny. But that's already there. It just needs to be awakened. And when bhakti awakens, knowledge also awakens. And detachment also awakens. It's already there. It's just a subset of bhakti. So that's the essence of scripture. Awakening bhakti awakens knowledge and detachment. That's uninterrupted and unmotivated and completely satisfies the self. So those are our first two questions. We're 1/3 done. What's the all-around good for all living entities? and what's the essence of all the scriptures. So those verses 6 and 7. Then very interesting, next, there's a set of 8 verses in a row. This is now chapter 2 summary, that have this very simple message. All work, our activities of life, should have one purpose behind them, awakening bhakti. And then there's another set of verses, 6 in a row, that are following that. How is it that bhakti is awakened? Very important set of verses. Some of you in the audience, you're familiar with Prabhupada's arrival prayer. When Prabhupada came in the Jaladuta and crossed the ocean and reached the Boston Harbor, he looked out from the ship to see what was over there in on the land side of the harbor, and he saw ignorance and passion abundant, and then began to ponder, and he wrote a poem to Krishna, prayer to Krishna, saying, how is it possible that these people that are totally immersed in ignorance and passion are going to understand the message of pure goodness, the message of pure devotional service? How is it possible? Mission impossible. And then he referred to these same verses from chapter 2 that describe the sequential awakening of bhakti in the hearts of those that are very covered. And those of you that like to read Bhagavad Gita, you'll find those same verses. You can look later. Chapter 7, text number 1. Right in the same list, verses 16 through 21. This is Shunvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana, etc. That's how it starts. Celebrated verses. And that first verse of chapter 7 is where Krishna makes a pledge to Arjuna. Krishna says, I'm going to explain to you how the topmost yoga can be achieved. Because that was the last verse of chapter 6. Topmost yoga is mind absorbed in Krishna, the senses engaged in his service. And how to achieve that in one's life, I'm going to explain to you. So the purport says, how? Mission impossible. In this dark age of Kali, people can come to the stage of the fullest perfection of pure devotion in 6 real simple verses. Now, it's compact, but essences are there in those 6 verses. And some of you may like reading Prabhupada's books, and you know that Rupa Goswami has given us different stages of bhakti, 9 stages of bhakti, beginning with hearing, Adar Shraddha, and so forth, all the way up to prema. And those 9 stages mirror these 6 verses. So I think you get the picture. These are really important verses. 16 through 21. Celebrated, often quoted, well worth your taking the time to read Canto 1, Chapter 2, verses 16 through 21 to understand the bhakti process, or the purport of Bhagavad Gita 7.1. Very important verses. The unfolding of the bhakti process. And then following that list of the bhakti processes comes a summary verse. That's text 22. I'm going to read it. No surprise, it starts, therefore. Therefore, certainly, since time immemorial, all transcendentalists have been rendering devotional service to Lord Krishna the personality of Godhead with great delight, because such devotional service is enlivening to the self. This prasadinam, prasadinam. The verse previously was yenatma suprasidati. Here it's prasadinam. Very similar. Very enlivening. So, devotional service, when it matures, becomes very enlivening to the soul. Deep inside, one can transcend all material circumstances by that profound enlivenment. Then the next set of verses, 3 in a row, start to speak of worship of demigods, like Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu. And then other demigods in the next 2 verses. And then Sukadeva Sutta starts speaking of the importance of worship of Vasudeva Krishna. It's sequential. There's worship that's less than complete and worship that's more complete. Worship of Krishna, Vasudeva Krishna. He's the real object. And the concluding verses of the chapter then touch on the next 2 questions. One of those 2 questions is, what adventures does the Lord perform in his incarnations related to creation? It's specific to forms of the Lord that are involved with creation. Who are they? What their activities are? The Purusha avatars. Because it's spoken just before that of Vasudeva, so now it's specific. The creation avatars, the 3 Vishnus, Kshirodakshay Vishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Mahavishnu, and their functions. So that's in 30 through 33. And then the next question is, why does Krishna appear in this world that he creates? The Purushas are involved in the process of creation. Why does he appear in the worlds that they create? That's a question from chapter 1. And the answer in chapter 2, thus the Lord of the universe maintains all planets inhabited by demigods, men, and lower animals, assuming the roles of incarnations. He performs pastimes to reclaim those in the mode of pure goodness. And that's the final verse of the chapter. He comes to reclaim those in the mode of pure goodness. He comes for the benefit of those who are his devotees. There's other purposes, of course, and other principal purposes is to attract the hearts and the minds of those that aren't at all in pure goodness. They're involved in ignorance and passion, to attract them once again to the spiritual position. It's an act of mercy or an act of mercy. There's a very merciful, deep, merciful feature to the purpose of the Lord's appearance in this world. So now we're 2/3 done. Moving along. So let's do a little quick review. What's the all-round good for all people at all times?
Loving devotional service.
Yeah. Without any motivation and without any interruption. And then they're feeling completely satisfied. All around good for all living entities. And then the next question, what's the essence of all the revealed scriptures? The essence of all revealed scriptures is Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojakaha Janayati Aishu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahaitukam, where devotional service awakens by its own accord, causelessly, knowledge and detachment. And Krishna is the object of all worship. Then, what are the activities of the Supreme Lord specific to the process of creation? So the Purusha avatars, they're described to a short degree. And then the purpose of the Lord's appearance, that's this other question. The purpose of the Lord's appearance is to bring those in purified goodness back to the spiritual world and to attract the hearts and the minds of those that aren't, to move in that direction. So now we're ready for chapter 3 and the other remaining 2 questions. So chapter 3 continues with this discussion of the Purusha avatars, forms of the Lord that are involved with the process of creation. And then there's 22 additional forms of the Lord that are other category besides Purusha avatars. Primarily they're Leela avatars, or forms of the Lord that perform pastimes. And it's just a mention of them by name and a short miniature description of who their activities and their function during their appearance in this world. And that takes us through verse 27, 6 through 27. So now we're ready for a very important verse, 28. 1 through 28, with we have a trumpet, we would blow a trumpet. Very important verse. Yeah. So for our audience here in Phoenix, there's one verse in the whole of the Srimad Bhagavatam's 18,000 verses that they all rest on. Just like when you build a house. Usually, houses that are meant to last for a while, there's a foundation. Now I know that some houses don't have foundations, and a tornado comes along and they're finished. But a substantial house has a foundation. And the house rests on the foundation. So the verse in the Bhagavatam that has that function, one out of the 18,000, supports all the other verses. It's called the Padi Bhasa Sutra. So sutra, you all know. Sutra means little code or aphorism, short statement. It says things that are essences, sutra. And Padi Bhasa Sutra is defined by our Acharya Jiva Goswami in this way. It's a definition of terms or system of abbreviations placed at the beginning of a book which must be understood in order to properly understand the remainder of the book. It explains the proper method for understanding a book. It gives a key by which one may understand the actual purport of a series of apparently unrelated facts and arguments. So whatever comes later in the book, it has to align with what that verse is. And if you understand something different than what that verse is, then you've misunderstood, and you have to reevaluate your understanding, because it's the basis and support of all the other verses. It's a very powerful text that governs all the other ones. It's like an emperor above many kings. Very important verse. And that very important verse says that Swayam Bhagavan Krishna, he who appears in Vrindavan is Swayam Bhagavan Krishna. is the source of all avatars. There's a list of avatars as mentioned, 22 of them. And then this verse says Krishna is the source of all of them. Of course, there's more than 22. There's unlimited, like waves in the ocean or waves in a river. And rivers can have lots of waves. How many waves are there in a river or in the ocean? Too many to count. As soon as you count them, then there's more than when you started counting. So the appearances of the Lord in this world are many, many, and there's one entity that's the source of them all. And that one that's the source of all avatars is Krishna. And not only all avatars, but everything else. Everything that's spirit and matter. In all categories of spirit and matter come from that source. And Krishna is that source. Very important verse. Very important verse. So, one can only imagine the commentators on the Bhagavatam spent a lot of time on that one verse, explaining its implication, because so many other topics of the Bhagavatam come from that. Then the verse that the Bhagavatam goes on, there's a nice text which I'm going to read. It just follows that 1:3:28 verse, and it's 29. And 29 is describing the fruit of having understood all these topics so far. The Palastuti is called. The little prayer, stuti, that's giving the fruit of all these other teachings. Here I'm going to read that for you. Whoever carefully recites the mysterious appearances of the Lord with devotion in the morning and in the evening gets relief from all miseries of life. That sounds like good advertisement. Really good marketing. Does it work? It works. It's a COVID-19 time, and so that people are dying. It says not that people won't die. This is an ultimate solution to life's problems. Ultimate solution to life's problems, according to Bhagavad Gita, it's Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, birth, death, disease, old age. Those miseries can be overcome by awakening the fullest potential of your spiritual consciousness and spiritual identity, and no longer taking birth in the material world. Purnarjanma na. No more birth. But going back home, back to God, if that's the ideal. One who hears these topics, because the rest of the Bhagavatam is expanding on those forms of the Lord as they appear in this world. And by hearing the Bhagavatam's message, one goes to the spiritual world, one goes to the place where those persons have descended in this world from, Vaikuntha, the spiritual realm. And one can experience it, that the getting lifted up and up and up through that sound vibration, through hearing and discussing, just as we're doing now. Then the next series of verses, they're progressive. It starts with trying to see the realm of spirit, or the existence of spirit within matter. Then it goes to seeing all as connected to the realm of spirit. And then it moves to the conception of Paramatma and Bhagavan. So we've now covered 5 questions. By the way, the 5th question, I didn't say it. Describe the forms of the Lord as they appear in this world. That's question 5 in that list of 22. Describe the forms of the Lord as they appear in this world. It's a quick summary. It's not elaborate. It's elaborated on in later cantos. And then here's the sixth question, and we're done for the evening, at least the speaking part. It's a good question too. They're all good questions. The sixth question is, unfortunately, it's Kali Yuga. And Kali Yuga is marked by Krishna's disappearance from this world. When Krishna leaves, there's a little juncture of time, and then Kali Yuga begins. So when Krishna was present, there was auspiciousness on earth. By the marks of his footprints, the earth was blessed and became abundant with all necessities of life, and miscreants were removed from the surface of the earth, and auspiciousness prevailed. But now Krishna is gone. So where will religious principles take shelter now that Krishna is gone? And the answer is the appearance of Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's presented very poetically. It goes like this: just as, which way is west? Where does the sun set? That way. Okay. So just as in the evening, because over here it's evening time, as the sun sets in the west, shortly after, the moon may rise in the east. There was a really bright moon last night. Wow, it was like a street light. And so if the moon rises shortly after the sun sets, and the moon is brilliant like the sun, then the darkness of the night is illuminated by the brilliance of the sun. But so Krishna set, the setting of the sun of Krishna set, Krishna's gone. But shortly after Krishna's disappearance, this moon-like, brilliant as the sun appearance of Krishna comes in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. But those of you that live in Arizona, and I'm over here in Houston, and the sun's pretty hot over here too, but not as hot as Houston. Phoenix, excuse me, not as hot as Phoenix, excuse me. So the sun can be scorching, but the moon is very cooling and soothing. So the Bhagavatam is as cooling and soothing as the moon, but as brilliant as the sun. Like when Krishna came, when it came to demons, Krishna just had his chakra and his gada, and he let them have it. And so that, bonk, and they're out of the way. But the Bhagavatam doesn't do like that. It, by sound vibration, it lifts consciousness and it cleanses consciousness in a very gentle, soothing, and beautiful way. That's why it's Srimad Bhagavatam, a very beautiful way to bring souls of this dark age of Kali to a position of light, of reawakening their forgotten relationship with Krishna in a very pleasing, soothing, and gentle way, as brilliant as the sun. Literally, this Bhagavatam is the literary form of Krishna, and that's how the chapter ends. So those are the 6 questions and 6 answers, and as I mentioned, I'll send to Prema Datri, she can circulate to all of you the list of where the questions are found in chapter 1 and where the answers are found in chapter 2 and 3. And I hope you become inspired and take some time to go through that little document and then read the verses themselves and the explanations of the verses. So it awakens in your heart this brilliant as the sun message in this dark age of Kali. And it will answer many, many questions, because life has lots of questions. the Bhagavatam supplies wonderful answers, transcendental answers to those questions. So let's see if there's some discussion.
You have a question? Okay.
Okay.
When we talk about Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, or the Lord Shiva,
Yeah.
is that Vishnu one of the Purusha?
Yes. Vishnu is spoken of a Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. It's the Purusha avatar Vishnu.
Second question. We did not talk about it, so if you don't feel it's appropriate according to the content, it's okay not to answer that. But the definition of the religion, we did not get into it.
That's right.
And sometimes people say, especially in India, they say, oh, what religion are you? Oh, I'm following Sanatan Dharma. But the Sanatan Dharma does not have any definition, does it?
Yes, it does.
And what would be?
Sanatan Dharma is Varnashram, Daivi Varnashram Dharma.
Okay.
Sanatana means eternal, and Dharma means occupation. So Sanatana Dharma means the occupation of serving Vishnu, now according to one's psychophysical nature. That's Daivi Varnashram Dharma, or Sanatana Dharma.
Okay. Okay.
Okay?
Okay. Thank you. You have questions?
We have two questions from Sucharita Devidasi. Sucharita.
Yeah.
First one, knowing who I am, is it that I am spirit soul and I have an eternal loving relationship with the Supreme Lord?
Yeah. That's the beginning. Keep going. There's details to who you are and who the Supreme Lord is, but that's certainly a beginning. Fundamental.
Second question is Vishnu also a demigod?
Sometimes in describing Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, Vishnu is included kind of loosely as a demigod, but technically no. Demigod in the sense that the three, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva or Mahesh, they're guna avatars. Guna avatars means forms that look after or oversee, controllers of the modes of nature. Goodness, passion, ignorance. That's what the three do. And goodness maintains, passion creates, ignorance destroys. Those are features of the modes. So Vishnu is the maintainer. In that sense, in that loose sense, a demigod, but in the higher sense, the powers of Brahma and Shiva come from him anyway. So not a demigod. So when, it's sometimes described in both ways. Yes and no. Go ahead.
Question from Kevala Bhaktidas.
Okay.
In discussing the answer for the first question, you mentioned one should perform loving devotional service in principle. Can you please elaborate?
Yeah. In principle, by using that phrase in principle, it means there are different religions in the world. Using the dictionary definition that Prabhupada would take is a belief system. So that's like, the common use of the word religion. But then belief in God, so there's, in principle, there's God that is known in different ways, in different cultures and different traditions, and is approached in different ways. That's so, therefore the word in principle. In principle means it's not a sectarian thing. It's not an ism, it's a principle. In principle. So here's another way of answering the same question, or that question. Some of you in the audience in Kevala Bhakti, I'm sure you have viewed the Hare Krishna movie, and I viewed it 6 times. It's really worth seeing it multiple times because it's so well done, very devotional. And one of the segments was a TV interviewer that was asking Prabhupada, do you find some opposition and any conflict with people of other religions? And Prabhupada's answer was no. I mean, that may not have been precisely his question, but something like that. And Prabhupada's answer was no. The real test is, now this is in principle. In principle, he didn't use that term, is love of God being awakened. And if love of God is being awakened, then there's no conflict. It can be this or that or the other way of expressing love of God. But if love of God is awakened, there's no conflict. Because real religion is that, awakening love of God. So that's what I meant by in principle. Not a sectarian, but a principle-based awakening love of God, serving Him with our senses, engaging in service to the master of the senses, in principle.
Next one is from Rupa Vilas Prabhu.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it seems like the answers to questions 1 and 2 are very similar.
Yes, they are.
Could you please contrast and compare those 2 answers in verses 1.2.6 and 1.2.7?
Okay, it's subtle, and the differentiation is given to us by Jiva Goswami, and I'll take my best shot at it, because it's subtle. The emphasis on the first one, in the first one, they're both dealing with devotional service, so that's the similarity. And then there's a point of emphasis. The point of emphasis is where the devotional service is to be rendered without motivation, material motivation, and without material interruption. So the emphasis then is in causeless devotional service, where it's unmixed with a motivation to achieve something, get something, but just to serve for the sake of loving service. And when that loving service is there, so that's the emphasis. That's the all-around good for all living entities. And then the second is also about devotional service, since even specific, Krishna Bhakti or Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojataha. So it's Krishna is the object, is the emphasis in that case, and that there's no separate need for acquiring knowledge or detachment because it's built within the process of devotional service. So that's the distinction, the explicit distinction. Now there's further expanded details which I don't think is the time and circumstance. But if you like, you can look in the commentary of Jiva Goswami because he made those distinctions, and you'll find them, I'm sure, in Bhakti Sandarbha. Hare Krishna.
Next question is from Kirti Prakash. While reading Srimad Bhagavatam, I have difficulty understanding the connection between some cantos, and it appears they are disconnected. How can I appreciate the connection?
I mentioned one reason, one requirement to see the connection is that Krishna is the source of everything. But and that particular verse that Krishna is the source of everything connects everything. But my experience from reading Srimad Bhagavatam, a lot over a period of time is it's not a it's not composed in a linear fashion, like, you know, making this comparison with an encyclopedia. When I grew up, we had this Encyclopedia Britannica in our living room. And so I, you know, became familiar with how it was laid out. There's a bucket over here, and then it's very comprehensive and, you know, complete. Then you move from that bucket over there to this bucket over here, and then that's complete, and then you move to another bucket. And the Bhagavatam isn't composed like that. It's not compartmental and linear. It's a big picture, and something over here connect with something over there, connect with something over there, connect with something over there. And you have to get the big picture to see the connection. And it takes a while. And it takes, you know, a thoughtful person to go through Bhagavatam enough times to see the big picture. And once you see the big picture, you know, this thing over here wiggles, and that thing over there wiggles. So there's the connection. And then those two things that wiggle connect with something else that didn't wiggle. But you make those two wiggle, and then that third thing wiggles. And so it's a big tapestry. It's something. Here's a little a visual image that may help you. If you look at here's the tablecloth, or you look at the carpet, or something that's a tapestry or something, an embroidery, and under a microscope, you just see some threads, and it's kind of like chaotic. It really doesn't make sense. But you take it out of the microscopic look and you step back, and wow, look at the tapestry embroidery, it's really beautiful. But you have this thread connect with that thread, connect with that thread to make the embroidery in the tapestry. It's not clear. So you have to go deeply into the subject matter, and then come back and look at the big picture, and then over there go deeply into the... So you just have to do that a number of times. You can't be lazy, you have to... And under the guidance of teachers and our acharyas, then it helps to get the big picture. When you have the big picture, you can see the connections. And if you don't see the connections at this stage, don't worry, just keep reading, and you'll start to become familiar with the details in the big picture. It grows on you like so many things that you learn. Let's say an orchestra. The conductor of an orchestra, he knows how all the different instruments are to sound, and the one that's just playing the flute over there doesn't know how the bass and the oboe and the violin and but the conductor knows the whole thing. And when it comes together, it's a nice sound, if they're doing their part properly. So, Vyasadeva's the conductor, and Krishna is inspiring him to write as he is writing. And you know, it's an orchestra piece that you may not understand how everything fits together. Keep reading. As you become more familiar and proficient, then you start to have a deeper appreciation of the beauty of the composition and its connections.
Question from Amara Devidasi. She asks, can you kindly explain Kala, Amsha, and Vibhanamsha? And also about the causal...
I don't think this is a question for a Sunday class. I'll ask tomorrow morning, because it's another group of people tomorrow morning. Okay. We're waiting for some online questions while you're hanging over there. We've been going for 1 hour.
There's one question from Prakash Govindan,
Yeah.
and it's a long one. Out of topic question, but I ask, as it is important to me, what does it mean to be truthful? Specifically, after Lord Krishna had left this planet, Mahatma Vidur visited Yudhishthir Maharaj, but although he knew about the disappearance of Krishna, he did not tell the Pandavas, but instead described Krishna's wonderful pastimes before his disappearance and then avoided telling the truth. Arjun found out by himself when he went to Dwarka later. Srila Prabhupada says in Bhaktivedanta Purport in Bhagavad Gita that a pure devotee says the full truth even if it displeases some people. Why did not Vidur tell Yudhishthir Maharaj the truth?
It's not like he didn't tell him the truth. He didn't tell him everything. And the reason he didn't tell him everything is to be very displeasing to the heart. There is another saying that one should not be the bearer of bad news, because the one who's the bearer, this is a Chanakya Pandit saying, because one who's the bearer of the bad news, then the bad feelings that people feel from the bad news gets pinned on the person that delivered the bad news. Now, in this age of Kali, people don't mind that at all. In fact, they make up bad news and then broadcast it.
They enjoy it.
But, a cultured person is very sensitive to, it's not like he was lying or deceiving, he was being sensitive to their deeper feelings. So he didn't want to be the bearer of that news, knowing that of course, in time they'll come to know. But he didn't want to be the bearer of that bad news, so he withheld some understanding or some facts for the softness of their heart. I mean, he's been away for 34 years. He's coming back, and if it was the present age, he would have sent out SMS messages all over the planet about Krishna's gone. Hey, guess what? But he didn't have that disposition. These are people that are very dear to him, and he's very dear to them. And he doesn't want to bring that news, so he was using his discretion is the better part of valor, as the saying goes. He wasn't deceiving, it was discretion, sensitive to their feelings. Yeah?
We have one more from Shashimukhi Mataji. What is the difference between worship and devotional service?
Nice question. Worship, Prabhupada makes this distinction. Devotional service is specific for the personality of Godhead. Worship is a way of honoring, like, let's just take what happens when you walk into a courtroom. Maybe some of you have never had the delightful opportunity to be in a courtroom, but I was there for some other purposes than the bad ones, but everyone's sitting down in the courtroom waiting for the judge to come in, and when the judge comes in, the court attendant says, "Everyone rise." It's not exactly worship, but it's showing respect. And as far as I understand, if somebody's in the courtroom and they don't stand up, they're under arrest. It's a violation of law. Because if the judge is not respected, how can he do his job? He's to be respected. Now, so it's not exactly worship, but worship has its expression of respect and gratitude to someone for something. So, in the Modes of Nature chapter, if people don't worship Krishna, do they worship someone else? And yes, they worship someone else according to the modes of nature. So people may worship a man, they may worship a demigod, they may worship ghosts and spirits. But so it's offering respect unto. That's worship. And devotional service, Prabhupada writes, it's specific to the personality of Godhead. The term is appropriate specifically to the personality of Godhead. We may respect or worship, somebody, a movie star or a politician or a rock musician or something like that. People go woo, 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 and they worship the person. But devotional service is different. It's an expression of the senses being used in service to the pleasure of the master of the senses. That's devotional service. There's some distinction. Yeah.
Next question is from Neeta. In today's situation, we understand and feel fortunate to have received the protection from devotional service in Srimad Bhagavatam.
Mm.
How do we extend this compassion to others rather than being indifferent? Sometimes we may come across as being in our own bubble and not relating to the current situations. Nama Priya Devidas.
Book distribution ki jai. That's a really simple expression of extending compassion. Or any other form, that's one form, but any other form of reminding others of Krishna. So you can remind others of Krishna by prasadam distribution. That's another nice, very nice way. Or just by your good demeanor and Krishna conscious conduct is a way of reminding people of Krishna, although it's more subliminal or less explicit, but it's a way of reminding other people of Krishna. So if you tax your brain and think of different ways of how you can remind other people of Krishna, you're practically there already. Now you have to be thoughtful, intelligent about time, place, circumstance, what's appropriate in this circumstance and not appropriate in another one. But it's the impetus is having received something, I wish to share it with others. In a service to the source from which I've received. There's another question. Okay.
This one's also from Kirti Prakash.
Okay.
What should be my mood while reading Bhagavatam so that I receive the fullness of the mercy of Bhagavatam?
I think your question gives the answer. And that is, the mood should be, I want to receive mercy. I'm eager for receiving mercy. And this is an expression, this is a very comprehensive package of mercy that we receive it. It's in the receiving mood, not a gathering knowledge mood, a receiving mercy mood. That's the best way. Then the heart is open and you feel something as you're reading. You're eager to receive mercy. Now several of these questions are from people in Phoenix. So then several of them are not also. It's a big mix. I think we're good. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.